Verne Harnish. Well, we got modeled after YPO, and I grew up around YPO, the Young Presidents Organization, but the moment was in 1986. I had a chance to host the first public speech Steve Jobs gave after being fired from Apple. And he came out, and because I was hosting Steve, we got the young Michael Dell, Mark Cuban, Neil Balter with California Closets, and 1,100 other young and student entrepreneurs from around the world. And I thought, look, he was just going to come over from Pixar, say a few words, and leave, but he ended up staying that evening because I threw kind of a special celebration for these top 100 young entrepreneurs under 30. But he was standing alone in the corner. I remember at that time a mentor of mine, Joe Mancuso, said it's okay to be independent, but no reason to be alone. And I turned to a buddy of mine, Greg Stem, and I said, look, there needs to be an organization for the Steve Jobs of the world. And that was the night the idea for YEO was formed. It took me about a year to raise the money, put the founding board together. So we launched in 1987. But look, the original young entrepreneur was Steve Jobs. It clearly was that night. I mean, Steve was so inspiring. Here he'd launched Apple and then had his baby ripped from his arms. But there is another moment. So one of the things we wanted to look at is how can you predetermine if somebody's going to be an entrepreneur or not? And so one of the Harvard professors looked at that and found 20 questions. And one of the questions is, and I tested it last night with some of the EO members, entrepreneurs tend to get motion sickness, seasickness. And so our very second YEO event, we rented this boat that would take us out to international waters to do, it was a gambling boat. And it was the same evening that this massive hurricane hit Galveston, Texas. And I called it the Great Equalizer. The guys with the $1 million business and the $100 million business, we were all hugging the porcelain god that night. And it became a rule within EO, no yachting events, just because the entrepreneurs have a tendency to get seasickness. So that was just one of those many moments that I'll never forget that kind of set some of the informal rules around what it took to host entrepreneurs. We got started with 22 founding board members, and today over 19,000 members worldwide. I think part of it's the network effect. You know, the bigger the organization gets, the more connections that you've got and more people that are there likely to be able to help you. So I think it's scale that has helped it the most, and I hope it 100Xs to like 2 million members. You know, it's like every startup, you know, there's no straight line in nature, particularly in business. So we had our fits and starts. There was a moment 4 years in that we thought we were going to lose the organization. And we had to kind of come to the rescue and get it relaunched again. Which, by the way, let me go back. I think the moment for me was, and it was really kind of one of my last hurrahs. It was in 91, 92, I launched this executive program, both with Inc. magazine and MIT. And up to that point, we really had no brand. But by bolting those two brands on, we ended up with 800 applicants for 48 seats. And that moment and those names is really what propelled us. And that program, which they still allow the old man to teach in, is something that I still cherish today. And so that was one of those moments. You know, from the very beginning is, first of all, that you're never going to be alone. And the amazing thing with the forum is that you've got 7 or 8 other entrepreneurs that you first learn that are just like you, that you're not alone in experiencing the ups and the downs. And to me, one of the prouder moments was in the pandemic. Generally, we meet face to face, but we couldn't do that in the pandemic. And people were under such pressure that they literally met via Zoom once a week. And it was so lovely that nobody was alone through that mess in the pandemic. And so I think, first of all, that you're not alone. Second is the power of learning. You know, leaders are readers, leaders are learners. And so the people that are really understand that the constraint to scaling is right between our ears, and the ability for us to not only learn from outsiders, but from each other, which is at the heart of the forum process, is I think what's powerful. It wasn't so much the growth of EO that affected my personal growth. It was back to the fundamental unit of EO, which is the forum. And I've been lucky to be in 3 different forums. Started in Washington, D.C. area, then Colorado, and then most recently in Barcelona. And those people are still some of my best friends today. And that's what I think is powerful.